A Werewolf Shifter Romance written by Catherine Stewart. Prologue. The ancient texts felt like brittle skin beneath Maeve's fingers, their secrets finally yielding to her relentless pursuit. Lyra. Just a name, an oblivious Omega girl, yet within her pulsed the dormant power of a forgotten lineage, a power Maeve would wield to shatter Alpha King Kai's predictable reign and forge her own empire. Because truth be told, Kai's brand of honor was a chain, and Maeve craved the inferno of true, unbridled dominion. Maybe it was fate that such a prize lay hidden in so simple a vessel, she mused, a chilling smile touching her lips. Or perhaps, she was the one to give fate its marching orders. What followed was the careful selection of her primary instrument, Davin, Lyra's fated mate. His ambition was a raw, useful thing. In fact, their fated bond was a gift, really, because it would make his betrayal, his staged disappearance, all the more potent in awakening Lyra's hidden legacy. A heart merely broken is one thing, a soul believing its destiny shattered. That kind of agony, Maeve knew, could unearth mountains of power. And you just have to wonder, don't you, how many would crumble under such a weight. Moments later, Davin slipped into her chamber, a shadow reeking of nervous greed. "Elder Maeve," he began, that tremor of avarice in his voice she found so easy to manipulate. "Davin," she cut in, her tone like polished steel. "Is your vanishing act prepared? Lyra suspects nothing?" He preened, the fool. "She's utterly devoted, Elder. Her heart is mine to break. Her devastation will be profound." He almost sounded regretful. Almost. Not only that, but he clearly imagined a grand future for himself in all this. "Excellent," Maeve stated. "Her grief is the key. It will unlock what lies dormant in her blood. So when you return to her, a survivor, she will be yours to command, and through her, the lineage will be mine." It was a simple, brutal equation. "And Kai?" Davin asked, a flicker of unease. "If he interferes?" A genuine, predatory smile finally spread across Maeve's face. "Our dear Alpha King Kai with his tiresome nobility, he might just try to save the poor, abandoned Omega, mightn't he?" Which meant Lyra could be delivered directly into Maeve's territory, under her very nose. Oh, the delicious irony. Let him, Davin. Let him play the hero. Because of that, my victory will be all the sweeter. She didn't know what she relished more, the thought of the power, or the image of Kai's eventual downfall. He nodded, eager to please, eager for his promised rewards. Without another word, he was gone, a fleeting shadow in her grand design. Maeve turned back to her charts, her finger tracing the name Lyra. Soon after, the game would truly begin. The forest outside held its breath, and Maeve felt a thrill course through her. The world was a stage, and she was about to direct its most spectacular, most devastating play. And Lyra was her unknowing star, about to take center stage in a tragedy she couldn't even fathom. One couldn't help but feel a little sorry for her, if one were prone to such useless emotions.
The old seer, with eyes like clouded moons, had traced the lines on Lyra's palm, her voice a dry whisper against the festival's joyous noise. "Child, your heart's true north is not where you believe it lies. A shadow will fall upon your brightest day, and from the deepest despair, a king of winter will forge a new destiny in fire and ice." Lyra had offered a polite smile then, her mind full only of Davin, her fated love, his warmth the only north she knew. How could she have known the seer's words were not a quaint blessing, but the overture to a symphony of betrayal, where her brightest day would indeed shatter, and the king of winter? Well, his arrival would be anything but gentle. The fire would burn, and the ice, she'd soon learn, could claim as fiercely as any flame. Lanterns, like captured stars, painted the ancient oaks of the Silver Crescent Festival grounds with a soft, golden light, their glow dancing on the excited faces of the pack. The air thrummed with a melody of anticipation, the scent of roasted boar, spiced berry wine, and the rich, earthy musk of werewolves on the cusp of celebration. Tonight was the night of the full moon mating, when destinies intertwined and lifelong bonds were forged in the moon's approving gaze. Lyra's own heart felt like a hummingbird taking flight within her chest, each beat a wild, joyful thrum against her ribs. She smoothed the simple, cream-colored shift her mother had woven, its threads as soft as a lover's sigh. Across the clearing, near the great bonfire that sent sparks spiraling towards the heavens, she saw him. Davin. Her Davin. His laughter, deep and resonant, was a melody that found her even above the rhythmic pulse of the ceremonial drums and the cheerful din of her pack. He stood with a knot of younger warriors, his dark hair kissed by firelight, his broad shoulders hinting at the strength she found so reassuring. He was everything she had ever dreamed of in a fated mate, strong, with a kindness that crinkled the corners of his eyes, and a smile that felt like sunshine reserved just for her. Nervous little moonflower? Lyra startled, a soft gasp escaping her as she turned to find her elder brother Rorik, his arm slung comfortably around his own mate, Alara. His grin was teasing, affectionate. Rorik, you move like a shadow sometimes, Lyra chided, but her own smile gave her away. And no, not nervous. Perhaps eager for the moon to finally rise. Alara's chuckle was warm as summer honey. We all felt that way, Lyra. It's a night unlike any other, and Davin, he's a fine male. From a strong line, just like yours, dear. A soft blush warmed Lyra's cheeks at the mention of her lineage. It was something her family spoke of in hushed, respectful tones. An ancestor blessed or perhaps uniquely touched by the moon itself, leaving a quiet, almost imperceptible strength in their blood. She didn't truly understand it, only that it sometimes made her feel a little different. Until Davin. With Davin, she simply felt like Lyra, cherished and complete. He is, she agreed, her voice barely a whisper, her gaze pulled back to him as if by an invisible string. He truly is everything. As if he'd heard her thoughts, Davin turned then, his eyes, the color of warm earth after a spring rain, finding hers across the flickering space between them. A slow, achingly sweet smile spread across his handsome face. He lifted a hand, a small, almost imperceptible wave, a secret acknowledgement that sent a fresh cascade of delight tumbling through her. Well, don't just stand there dreaming, little sister. Rorik nudged her gently. Go to him. Your destiny awaits, and it seems he's as impatient as you are. Lyra laughed, the sound light as thistledown. There is no one else for him, Rorik, nor for me. It was the most beautiful certainty in her world. She moved then, her feet barely seeming to touch the soft earth, the world around her fading until only the path to Davin remained clear. The very air between them seemed to hum, to vibrate with the promise of what was to come. I was beginning to wonder if you'd decided to hide from me, Lyra, Davin said, his voice a low, intimate caress as he turned fully towards her, his friends melting respectfully into the surrounding festivities. He took both her hands, his palms strong and reassuringly warm against hers. And miss the most important night of my life? Lyra tilted her head, her heart feeling too large for her chest. Never, Davin. I feel as though I've been waiting for this moment since I first drew breath. His thumbs traced gentle circles on the backs of her hands, sending shivers up her arms. As have I, my love. Our ancestors, they guided us to this. They recognized the echo in our blood. He squeezed her hands. That old seer, Mara, you know she always said your bloodline was singular. Moon-kissed, she called it, with a strength that slumbers. I feel it when I'm near you, Lyra. Like a hidden wellspring, a quiet power just waiting. Lyra felt that familiar warmth creep up her neck. It's just old pack lore, Davin, whispered around fires. Perhaps, he murmured, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath hitch. And then, just for an instant, a heartbeat. Something unreadable flickered deep within their familiar warmth. A shadow, perhaps? A coolness she'd never noticed before? It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the tender devotion she clung to. Or perhaps, he continued, his voice dropping to a husky whisper. It is a truth that simply awaits its dawn. No matter. It is a part of you. And soon, every part of you will belong to me. He leaned closer, his breath a warm promise against her ear. And I to you, Lyra, for all time. The words all time settled in her soul, a perfect, unshakable truth. This was her beginning. She couldn't possibly have seen the faint, almost invisible thread of calculation woven into the tapestry of his adoration, or understood that the slumbering strength he spoke of was a prize he intended to help another steal, not a treasure to be cherished. The festive scent of herbs and sweetgrass, once a promise of joy, now felt cloying, heavy in the air of Lyra's family den. The joyous music of the festival had long since dissolved into an unsettling silence, a silence that pressed in on Lyra, each passing hour amplifying the hollow ache of dread in her chest. Davin was gone. Vanished. She paced the familiar den, the woven rugs that had cushioned her childhood steps now feeling like uneven, treacherous ground. Her simple bonding shift, once a symbol of her brightest hope, now felt like sackcloth against her skin. He wouldn't just leave, she whispered, the words a desperate plea to the shadowed corners, to her worried parents, to her grim-faced brother, Rorik, all huddled near the dying embers of the hearth. There must be a reason. An accident during a hunt? A border patrol ambushed? Her father, Alpha Theron of the Silver Crescent Pack, a man whose stern face usually held a deep well of love for her, sighed, the sound heavy with a weariness that aged him before her eyes. Lyra, child, all patrols have reported back. No hunting parties were sanctioned so close to the bonding. He was last seen by young Elmsworth heading towards the Whispering Falls. He said Davin told him he needed a moment alone before the ceremony. The falls? Rorik's brow furrowed, his voice tight with a confusion that mirrored Lyra's own. But why? So close to everything? It makes no sense. Perhaps to gather his thoughts, Lyra offered, her voice a thin thread of hope. To compose himself? But the words felt hollow even to her own ears. Davin, her gregarious, life-loving Davin, seeking solitude right before their union? It was uncharacteristic. Wrong. Myra? Lyra turned to her mother, her last hope. You spoke with him just before. Did he seem himself? Did he say anything? Her mother's face was a mask of pale distress, her normally nimble fingers twisting restlessly in the fabric of her gown. He was excited, Lyra, overflowing with joy. He spoke only of his love for you, of the future you would build, the strength your union would bring to our pack. Myra's voice broke on the last word. Strength. That word again. It used to make her feel proud, special. Now, it felt like a brand. A sudden flurry of movement at the den's entrance made them all jump. Beta Torvin, his weathered face set in grim lines, strode in, his presence immediately sucking the last vestiges of hope from the air. Alpha Theron, Torvin's voice was a low rumble, devoid of its usual warmth. We have searched every path, every hollow, from the Whispering Falls to the Stone River borders. There is no trace. It is as if the very forest has erased him. Erased. The word hung in the air, cold and final. Lyra felt a tremor run through her. No, it couldn't be. Just as the despair threatened to swallow her whole, another figure burst into the den, a young warrior, his chest heaving, his eyes wide with urgent news. The wind at the pack boundary was a raw, biting thing, whipping strands of her dark hair across her face, stinging her already tear-swollen eyes. It felt like the forest itself was weeping with her, or perhaps for her. Her small bundle of hastily gathered possessions was a meager weight in her trembling hands, a pathetic testament to a life about to be extinguished. Behind her, the stony, unforgiving faces of her pack were a wall of condemnation. Before her, the wild, untamed forest stretched into an oblivion of green and shadow, a lonely grave awaiting her. Rorik had raged, his voice hoarse with futile defiance. Her mother had collapsed in quiet sobs, pressing a small, smooth moonstone, a family talisman, into Lyra's palm. A cold comfort against the coming darkness. Two young warriors, their expressions carefully neutral, nudged her forward. "Move," one of them muttered, his voice barely audible, laced with a pity that was almost harder to bear than outright contempt. "It is the Alpha's will." Lyra stumbled, her legs feeling like water. This was it. The end of everything she had known. Her fated love, a phantom. Her pack, her executioners. The old seer's words clawed at her mind. Your deepest wound. Oh, this wound was a chasm, bottomless and consuming. She drew a ragged, shuddering breath, steeling herself for that first, irrevocable step into banishment, into nothingness. "Halt!" The command was a physical blow, a shockwave of sound and power that ripped through the tense air, striking every werewolf present, from the lowest Omega to Lyra's own Alpha father, into sudden, absolute stillness. Through the ranks of the Silver Crescent warriors who parted before him as if cleaved by an invisible blade, strode a figure of such raw, breathtaking power that the very air seemed to thin, to crackle around him. He was taller, broader, more intensely present than any being Lyra had ever conceived. His dark hair, the color of a storm-tossed midnight, was wild, untamed, framing a face that looked as if it had been hewn from the granite heart of the mountains themselves, all unforgiving plains, harsh angles, and an aura of ancient, unyielding authority. And his eyes. Gods, his eyes. They were the impossible blue of a winter sky reflected in glacial ice, ancient, knowing, and utterly focused on her, pinning her where she stood. Alpha King Kai of the formidable Northern Alpha Pack. She had only seen him once before, a distant, imposing silhouette at the ill-fated festival, the Alpha of the polite, observant Elder Maeve. Now he was here, and he was looking at her. He stopped a mere pace away, and Lyra could feel the heat radiating from him, a primal force that both terrified and inexplicably drew her. The forest held its breath. Her pack held its breath. Lyra forgot how to breathe at all. This Omega. Kai's voice was a low, resonant growl, the sound of rocks grinding in a deep riverbed. Yet it carried effortlessly, each syllable imbued with absolute command. He gestured almost dismissively towards her astonished father. "She is cast out? For what crime?" Alpha Theron, visibly struggling to maintain his composure before this overwhelming presence, stammered, "Alpha King Kai, she is unbonded. Her fated mate vanished. She brings misfortune." Kai's chilling blue eyes did not leave Lyra. A muscle feathered in his jaw. "Misfortune," he repeated, the word tasting like an insult on his tongue. Then, his gaze swept over Lyra, a slow, deliberate assessment that made her skin burn and her bones ache with a strange new premonition. What happened next, Lyra could never have anticipated, not in her wildest, most terrifying dreams. He took another step, closing the small distance between them, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. His scent, wild and clean like a blizzard over ancient pines, enveloped her, overwhelming, intoxicating. "Then if she is misfortune to you," Alpha King Kai declared, his voice dropping to a possessive rumble that vibrated through Lyra's very soul, leaving no room for argument, no possibility of refusal, "she will be misfortune to me." He reached out, his large hand surprisingly gentle as it closed around her upper arm, his touch a brand of ice and fire. "I, Kai, Alpha King of the Northern Pack, claim her." The world went silent, then erupted in her mind. Claimed? By him? The terrifying, legendary Alpha King of the North? Lyra stared up into those glacial eyes, seeing not rescue, but a different kind of abyss, deeper and far more dangerous than the one her pack had condemned her to. His grip tightened, not painfully, but with an unshakable finality. "She comes with me." And just like that, before anyone could utter a protest, before Lyra could even form a coherent thought beyond the sheer, overwhelming shock, his guards were there, surrounding her, and she was being pulled away, away from her past, away from everything she knew, into the terrifying, unknown dominion of the Alpha King. Her last sight was of her mother's horrified face, and Rorik's stunned, helpless rage. The old seer's prophecy, it seemed, was just beginning. The world had tilted, hadn't it? One moment I was dirt beneath my pack's feet, a cursed thing to be discarded, and the next I was a prize, a claim, a possession of a king so formidable his mere presence stole the breath from my lungs and the strength from my limbs. I didn't know then if I'd been saved from a quick death only to be delivered to a slower, more terrifying one. All I knew was the iron grip on my arm, the scent of blizzard and ancient pines that was him, Alpha King Kai, and the utter, soul-deep certainty that my life, as I knew it, was not just over, but had perhaps never truly begun until this cataclysmic moment. Was this the deepest wound the old seer had spoken of, or just the first tremor before the real devastation hit? The journey north was a blur, a nightmare painted in shades of gray rock, endless snow-dusted forests, and the suffocating scent of unfamiliar wolves. His wolves. They flanked me, silent as ghosts, their eyes occasionally flicking towards me with an unreadable mixture of curiosity and something that felt chillingly like appraisal. I huddled in the rough-spun cloak one of them had tossed over my thin bonding shift, the wind biting at any exposed skin, each gust a reminder of how far I was being torn from everything I'd ever known. Davin. Oh, Davin, where were you? Did you feel this? Did you know the fate that had befallen your Lyra? The thought of him, lost, perhaps suffering, was a fresh stab of agony in my already bleeding heart. And Kai? He rode ahead, a dark, implacable figure on a massive black charger, never once looking back, never once speaking a word to me since that terrifying pronouncement at my pack's border. It was as if I were a parcel, claimed and now being delivered. My feelings, my terror, utterly irrelevant. When we finally arrived, the fortress, for no other word could describe it, rose from the jagged peaks like a dragon's crown, all black stone and formidable towers that scraped the bruised twilight sky. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a declaration of power, stark and unyielding, much like its master. His pack members, the Northern Alphas, were as formidable as their stronghold. They lined the courtyard as we entered, their faces hard, their eyes sharp, missing nothing. I saw no welcome there, only a disciplined curiosity that felt more threatening than open hostility. Whispers followed me, a sibilant wave of speculation. The Alpha Kings claimed, from the south, a cast-off. I flinched with every overheard word, my shame a fresh, burning brand. I was escorted by two stern-faced she-wolves, their scents all ice and discipline, through endless, echoing stone corridors lit by sputtering torches. The air was cold, carrying the faint metallic tang of old battles and something else, something wilder, more ancient. My quarters, when I was finally shown them, were vast, opulent even, with thick furs piled on a large bed and a hearth where a fire already crackled. But the heavy wooden door closed behind me with a thud that echoed like a prison cell, and the single arrow-slit window looked out onto a sheer drop, a dizzying vista of snow-capped peaks and endless, unforgiving forest. A gilded cage. That's what this was. "Food and water will be brought," one of the she-wolves had said, her voice devoid of inflection, before they left me. Alone. Utterly, terrifyingly alone. I sank onto the edge of the massive bed, the furs surprisingly soft beneath my trembling fingers. Davin. My heart ached with his name. Was he out there somewhere, hurt, captured by those cloaked figures Elder Maeve had spoken of? Or had he truly abandoned me as my pack believed? No, I couldn't accept that. Not Davin. And Kai. Alpha King Kai. Why? Why claim me? What could he possibly want with a cursed Omega, an outcast from a minor pack? The questions spun in my head, a relentless vortex of fear and confusion. But no answers came, only the mournful howl of the wind outside my window, a sound as desolate as my own soul. Days bled into one another, each dawn a fresh wave of the same suffocating isolation. Food appeared, water was replenished, but no one spoke to me beyond clipped necessary instructions. I tried a few times to ask the silent serving Omegas about Davin, about Kai, about why I was here, but they would only lower their eyes, a flicker of what might have been fear in their depths, and scurry away. My grief for Davin was a constant, throbbing ache, a hollow where my heart used to be. My fear of Kai, of this place, of my utterly unknown future, was a shadow that clung to me, a suffocating blanket. What was he waiting for? Then, one afternoon, as I stared listlessly out at the brutal beauty of the snow-swept mountains, there was a soft knock at my door. Before I could even find my voice, it opened, and an older she-wolf entered. She was tall, her bearing regal despite her age, her silver-streaked dark hair elaborately braided. Her eyes, a pale, intelligent gray, held a calm that was almost unnerving. "Lyra of the Silver Crescent," she said, her voice smooth, like polished river stones. "I am Maeve, an elder of this pack, an advisor to Alpha King Kai." Maeve. The name was familiar. She was the one who had reported seeing Davin with the cloaked figures. A tiny, desperate flicker of hope ignited within me. Maybe she knew something more. "Elder Maeve," I managed, my voice raspy from disuse. I rose from the window seat, trying to gather some semblance of dignity, though I felt like a frightened rabbit. "The Alpha King has asked me to see to your well-being," she continued, her gaze sweeping around the room, lingering for a moment on my untouched tray of food. "You must be finding your transition challenging." Challenging? Was that what she called being ripped from your life? Your fated mate vanished, your pack turned against you, only to be claimed by a terrifying stranger and imprisoned in a frozen fortress? I don't understand why I'm here, Elder," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Alpha King Kai, he claimed me, but he hasn't spoken to me, hasn't told me anything." Maeve's expression remained serene, a mask of gentle understanding. "Alpha King Kai has many responsibilities, child. His ways are not always immediately apparent, but rest assured, he does nothing without reason." She moved closer, her scent a complex mix of mountain herbs and something ancient, like old parchment. "Tell me of your pack, Lyra, your family. Your lineage is of some note, I believe?" Her eyes, those calm gray eyes, were fixed on me, and suddenly, despite her gentle tone, I felt like a specimen under glass. My lineage. Why was everyone so interested in my lineage? "It is an old line, Elder," I said cautiously. "Respected in the Silver Crescent." "Indeed," she murmured, a faint smile touching her lips. "And Davin, your fated mate. His loss must be a terrible blow. Such a strong connection, so cruelly severed." My breath hitched. Do you know anything more, Elder, about what happened to him?" Maeve's gaze softened with what looked like genuine sympathy. "Alas, child, only what was reported. The silencers are a blight upon our lands, preying on the vulnerable, disrupting the sacred bonds." She sighed. "It is a cruel world we live in, but you are safe here, Lyra. Kai's protection is absolute." Safe? Was I? Or was I merely in a different kind of trap? Looking into Maeve's eyes, I wanted to trust her, to believe in her kindness. But deep down, a tiny, cold voice whispered a warning I was too desperate, too lost to heed. She didn't know what scared her more, that little voice seemed to say, the king who held her captive, or the elder who offered such smooth, knowing comfort. Another week crawled by under Maeve's gentle, probing inquiries and Kai's continued thunderous silence. The isolation, the not knowing, it was eating away at me. My grief for Davin was a raw, open wound, but beneath it, a different emotion was beginning to smolder. Anger. Anger at my pack for their cruelty. Anger at whatever forces had taken Davin, and a simmering, helpless rage at Alpha King Kai for dragging me here only to ignore me, to leave me suspended in this terrifying limbo. One evening, after another solitary meal, something inside me just snapped. I couldn't bear it another moment. I had to know. I had to face him. My heart hammered against my ribs like a war drum as I stormed out of my chamber, for the first time without escort, and marched through the labyrinthine corridors, driven by a recklessness born of despair. I didn't know where his private chambers were, but I followed the strongest, most potent alpha scent, the one that permeated this entire fortress, the one that both terrified and intrigued me on a level I refused to acknowledge. It led me to a pair of massive iron-bound doors, guarded by two stoic warriors who looked at me with surprise, then alarm, as I pushed past them without a word. The chamber within was vast, dominated by a roaring fire and the imposing figure of Alpha King Kai himself. He was standing before a large table strewn with maps and scrolls, his back to me, but he stiffened, then slowly turned as I entered. His blue eyes, colder and more piercing than any winter storm, raked over me, and I felt a tremor of pure, primal fear. But the anger, the desperation, it was stronger. Why? The word burst from me, raw and ragged. Why did you bring me here? He didn't speak for a long moment, simply watched me, his expression unreadable, carved from stone. The silence stretched, taut and heavy, filled only with the crackle of the fire and the frantic beat of my own heart. You are under my protection, he stated finally, his voice that deep, gravelly rumble that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. It wasn't an answer. It was a declaration. Protection? I cried, gesturing wildly around the opulent prison. You call this protection? I am your prisoner. My fated mate is gone, my pack has cast me out, and you drag me here and leave me to rot in silence. What do you want from me, Alpha King? He took a step towards me, and I instinctively recoiled, but stood my ground. I want what is mine to take, little moonflower, he said, his voice dropping to a possessive purr that sent shivers of a different, more disturbing kind down my spine. And your value, it seems, is far greater than your previous pack understood. My value? I scoffed, emboldened by a surge of defiant fury. What value? I am a cursed Omega, an outcast. My fated bond is broken. Bonds can be reforged, he said, his eyes glinting with something I couldn't decipher. Hunger? Amusement? And curses. Curses can be blessings in disguise. Your blood, Lyra of the Silver Crescent. It sings a very old song. A very powerful one. My blood, again. What do you know of my blood? I demanded, fear warring with a desperate need to understand. He merely smiled then, a slow, predatory curving of his lips that held no warmth, only a chilling promise of power and possession. Enough to know you are safer here with me than you could ever be out there alone. He paused, his gaze dropping to my throat, lingering there for a heartbeat before returning to my eyes. For now, that is all you need to understand. You are mine. And what is mine? I keep. His words were a chain, each one a heavy link binding me to him, to this place, to a destiny I couldn't see, couldn't comprehend. Frustration and terror warred within me. He was giving me nothing, yet claiming everything. Her body moved on instinct, or so it felt, as I took a small step back, the fire at my back, the Alpha King a formidable shadow before me. The days that followed my confrontation with Kai were no less isolating, but they were different. He still kept his distance, yet I felt his awareness of me like a constant pressure, a weight on my soul, and something new. Something unsettling had begun to stir within me. Small things. When a particularly vicious she-wolf from his pack had tried to corner me in a corridor, her eyes glinting with malice, a sudden, intense wave of Something had emanated from me. I hadn't done anything, hadn't said anything, but she'd stumbled back, her face paling, her aggression vanishing as if doused by icy water before she'd turned and fled. I'd stood there trembling, my heart pounding, with no understanding of what had just occurred, only a strange thrumming under my skin, a sensation of power. Then there were the dreams, more vivid, more disturbing than ever. Dreams of Davin, not lost and suffering, but cold-eyed and calculating. Dreams of Maeve, her gentle smile twisting into something knowing, predatory. And dreams of Kai, his icy blue eyes burning into me, not with cruelty, but with an intensity that left me breathless and shaken when I woke. One night I was trapped in a particularly vivid nightmare. I was running, lost in a dark, twisted forest. The silencers, those shadowy figures Maeve had mentioned, the ones who supposedly took Davin, were closing in, their whispers like dry leaves skittering behind me. I could feel their cold breath on my neck, their grasping hands. I screamed, a raw, terrified sound, and bolted upright in my bed. My real bed in Kai's fortress, my heart slamming against my ribs, my body slick with cold sweat. The room was dark, the fire in the hearth long dead. But I wasn't alone. A shadow detached itself from the deeper darkness near the door. My breath caught. Kai. He moved with that silent, predatory grace, a deeper shadow within the shadows, until he stood beside my bed. I couldn't see his expression in the gloom, but I could feel the intensity of his gaze, the sheer force of his presence. "You cried out," he said, his voice a low rumble, less harsh than usual, almost concerned? No, that couldn't be right. "A nightmare," I managed, my voice trembling. He was silent for a long moment. Then, "The silencers?" I nodded, clutching the furs to my chest. How could he know? "They are real, Lyra," he said, his voice dropping even lower. "And your fear of them is justified. Your bloodline makes you a beacon to such darkness." Before I could ask how he knew so much, what he meant, a sudden, inexplicable coldness filled the room, far colder than the mountain night outside. It pressed in on me, suffocating, and a low growl rumbled in Kai's chest, a sound so deep, so primal, it vibrated through the very stone of the fortress. And then, the small carved moonstone my mother had given me, the one I kept clutched in my hand even in sleep, began to glow. A soft, silvery light pulsed from within my fist, pushing back the unnatural cold, bathing the small space between me and Kai in its gentle radiance. I stared at it, astonished, and then up at Kai. In the moonstone's ethereal light, I saw his face clearly for the first time in that intimate space. His eyes were wide, fixed on the glowing stone, and in their icy depths, I saw not threat, but a flicker of something else. Awe? Recognition? The glow faded as suddenly as it had appeared, plunging the room back into near darkness, the oppressive cold receding with it. The only sound was my own ragged breathing and the distant howl of a wolf, a sound that seemed to echo the sudden wild thumping of my own heart. Kai said nothing more. But as he turned and melted back into the shadows, leaving me alone once more with the echo of his presence and the mystery of the glowing stone, I knew, with a chilling certainty that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with some dawning, terrifying understanding, that my value, as he called it, was far more dangerous and far more profound than I could ever have imagined. And the king who claimed me? He knew it too. The game, whatever it was, had just taken a very, very dangerous turn. The moonlight still clung to my skin like a phantom touch, long after Alpha King Kai had melted back into the shadows of my chamber. That tiny, carved moonstone, my mother's last gift, had glowed, pulsed with a soft, silvery light, as if it had a heartbeat of its own, pushing back a coldness that had felt ancient and evil. And Kai? He had seen it, His glacial eyes, usually so unreadable, had widened with something that looked terrifyingly like recognition, or perhaps even awe. What did it mean? What in the name of all the moon's phases was I becoming? Was this the value he spoke of? This strangeness that now seemed to live inside me? And was it a shield? Or just a brighter, more tempting lure for the darkness that seemed to be closing in? The very next morning, before the watery dawn had even fully breached the mountain peaks, Elder Maeve appeared at my door. Her face, usually a mask of serene neutrality, was etched with a look of profound, almost maternal concern that immediately set my already frayed nerves on edge. "Lyra, child," she said, her voice a soft, soothing balm that I instinctively wanted to shrink from. "I heard there was a disturbance last night. The Alpha King himself attended you." I clutched the now cool moonstone in my palm, hidden within the folds of my rough woolen tunic. It was just a nightmare, Elder. Could I tell her about the stone? About the unearthly cold? About Kai's unnerving presence? Maeve's gaze, those pale, knowing gray eyes, seemed to see right through my flimsy excuse. Nightmares can sometimes be echoes, Lyra. Echoes of what lies within, or what seeks us from without. She glided into the room, her movements fluid and graceful as a forest cat. "The Alpha King is concerned, as am I." She paused, letting her words settle like dust motes in the chilly air. "Your lineage, Lyra. We have spoken of it. It is an old and potent one. Sometimes such ancient blood carries with it certain sensitivities. Gifts, some might call them, burdens, others." My heart began to hammer. Gifts? Burdens? I don't understand, Elder Maeve." "The glowing stone," she said softly, her eyes flicking to my clenched fist. "The sudden authority you displayed with those aggressive young she-wolves in the corridor last week. The way animals sometimes react to your presence. These are not common occurrences, child." I stared at her, speechless. She knew. She had been watching, cataloging my oddities. "These are manifestations," Maeve continued, her voice a gentle murmur. "Signs that the power within your blood is stirring, perhaps awakened by the trauma of recent events." Her gaze was full of carefully crafted sympathy. "It is nothing to fear, Lyra, if understood, if controlled, but uncontrolled." She let the implication hang heavy in the air. "It can be dangerous, to you and to others." "Dangerous?" I whispered, the word tasting like ash. "Potentially," she conceded with a small, reassuring smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "But that is why I am here. I have studied the old ways, the ancient lines. I can help you, Lyra, help you understand this heritage, guide you in mastering whatever gifts it may bestow, so that it becomes a strength, not a vulnerability." Her offer was like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. I was so lost, so frightened by these strange new facets of myself. Davin? What would Davin think if he knew? Would he still see me as his Lyra, or as something other? The thought was a fresh stab of pain. You would do that for me?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "After my pack? After everything?" Maeve's hand, cool and dry, covered mine, gently uncurling my fingers from the moonstone. "You are under Alpha King Kai's protection now, Lyra, and by extension mine. It is my duty and my desire to see you safe and whole." Her smile was kind, her eyes sincere, or so I desperately wanted to believe. What would I have to do?" "Only learn, child," she said, her voice like a lullaby. "Learn about yourself, about the incredible legacy that flows within you. Trust me, Lyra. Let me guide you." And what choice did I have truly? Adrift in this terrifying new world, with a king who spoke only in riddles of possession and value, Maeve's offer of understanding, of control, felt like the only anchor in a raging storm. Looking back, How could I have been so blind to the silken threads of her manipulation, so eager to grasp the hand that was already so carefully weaving my snare? I will trust you, Elder Maeve, I said, the words sealing a pact whose true cost I could not yet fathom. The whispers started a few days after I agreed to Maeve's tutelage. At first, they were just that. Hushed, fearful murmurs in the corridors, glances that skittered away when I met them. But then, a messenger arrived from a southern patrol, his face gray with exhaustion and terror, his words painting a horrifying picture for Alpha King Kai and his council, a picture I only pieced together from frightened fragments overheard from serving girls. The silencers. They were on the move. More brazen than ever. Not just random attacks, but targeted ones. They were hunting, and their prey. Ancient bloodlines. Families with lineages stretching back to the first alphas, families whose blood hummed with the old moon magic. Families like mine. My blood ran cold. Suddenly, Maeve's interest in my legacy, Kai's cryptic words about my value, they took on a new, terrifying dimension. I wasn't just an outcast Omega he'd whimsically claimed. I was a target. And this fortress, which had felt like a prison, now seemed like the only thing standing between me and those shadowy, ruthless hunters. Kai's reaction to the news was swift and absolute. The already formidable security around the fortress doubled. Warriors patrolled the ramparts day and night, their faces grim. And my own escort, the two stoic she-wolves who were my constant shadows, became even more vigilant, their eyes constantly scanning, their bodies tensed for attack. I felt like a prized falcon, tethered and hooded, valuable only for what I might represent, or what I might become. One evening, I was in the small walled garden Maeve had suggested I use for meditation and communion with my inner self. It was the only place I felt a sliver of peace, the scent of hardy mountain herbs, a faint echo of the forests I missed so desperately. I overheard two guards speaking in low tones just beyond the wall, their voices urgent. Another settlement attacked near the Frost River. Whole bloodline wiped out, they say. The silencers left no survivors. Alpha Kings, in a fury, said the Northern Pack will not yield, said she will be protected at all costs. She. Me. My breath hitched. Protected at all costs. But why? Was it truly for my safety, or for the powerful song my blood sang, as Kai had put it? Was I a person to him, or merely a precious, endangered artifact? The weight of that question, the terrifying ambiguity of my existence here, pressed down on me, heavier than the mountains themselves. No matter how hard I tried to understand, the answers remained just out of reach, veiled in the Alpha King's silence and Maeve's knowing smiles. A few weeks later, a rare ceremonial gathering was announced, the welcoming of the first snow, a solemn, ancient tradition in the Northern Pack. To my utter shock and horror, Maeve informed me that Alpha King Kai expected my attendance. As his claimed Lyra, she'd said, her tone leaving no room for argument, your presence is required. It will show the pack unity, strength. Unity? I felt anything but unified. I felt like a fraud, a frightened imposter in borrowed furs, about to be paraded before a pack that largely despised or feared me. The thought of facing all those hard, assessing eyes made my stomach churn. The great hall was a sea of powerful bodies, the air thick with the scent of pine, wood smoke, and wolf. Kai sat upon a massive carved stone throne at the head of the hall, looking every inch the formidable king he was, his presence dominating the vast space. I was placed on a slightly lower, unadorned seat to his right, feeling small and exposed, my hands twisting in my lap. The ceremony was long, filled with ancient chants and solemn vows I didn't understand. I kept my eyes downcast, acutely aware of the hundreds of pairs of eyes on me. Then, a dispute broke out near the back of the hall, two young alphas, their blood running hot, challenging each other over some perceived slight, their growls escalating towards violence. The festive mood shattered, tension rippling through the assembled pack. Before Kai's guards could intervene, before even Kai himself could rise, he simply lifted a hand, his expression unchanged, his icy blue eyes flicking towards the disturbance. A low, almost inaudible rumble emanated from his chest. Not a command, not a threat, but a pure, undiluted wave of absolute authority. And just like that, the hall fell silent. The two young alphas froze, their aggression draining away as if a tap had been turned off, their heads bowing in immediate, instinctual submission. I stared, astonished. I had seen alpha power before, my father's, but this was different. This was primal, elemental. It wasn't just about rank. It was about an inherent force of will that bent others to it without a word. Kai lowered his hand, the incident already dismissed. But for a moment, his gaze met mine, and in that shared instant, across the expanse of the great hall, I saw something beyond the cold king, beyond my terrifying captor. I saw the weight of his crown, the burden of his absolute power, the loneliness of the peak upon which he stood, and a strange, unwelcome flicker of something stirred within me. Not fear this time, not anger, something dangerously close to understanding, or perhaps a reluctant respect. The moment passed, his eyes becoming shuttered once more, but it left an echo, a tiny crack in the wall of my resentment. Maybe it was fate, this unwilling connection, or maybe it was just the shared experience of being utterly, terrifyingly powerful in a world that didn't understand. Maeve's lessons became more focused after that. She spoke of ancestral conduits, of channeling the moon's essence, her words painting pictures of ancient she-wolves who could soothe the most savage beast with a touch, or command the respect of entire packs with a mere glance. It sounded like fanciful tales, yet that incident with the aggressive she-wolves in the corridor, their sudden retreat, had that been me? She began to guide me through exercises, teaching me to listen to the thrumming beneath my skin, to the song of my bloodline, as she called it. It felt foolish sitting there in the cold garden, trying to hear a song no one else could. Then she arranged what she called a harmony exercise. Several younger pack members, known for their boisterous, somewhat unruly nature, were brought to the training grounds. Maeve explained that my lineage, if properly focused, could project an aura of calm, of authority, that could soothe even the most agitated spirits. It was, she said, a vital skill for any Luna. Luna. The word sent a jolt through me. Was that what she was grooming me for? Kai's Luna? The thought was both absurd and terrifying. The young wolves were set to a series of sparring matches, their energy quickly escalating, growls turning into snarls, play-fighting teetering on the edge of real aggression. Maeve stood beside me, her voice a calm murmur. Reach out with your senses, Lyra. Feel their agitation. Now, project your own calm. Envision a still, moonlit pool. Become that stillness, let it flow from you. I closed my eyes, skeptical but desperate. I thought of the glowing moonstone, of the strange quiet I'd sometimes felt deep inside myself. I tried to imagine that stillness, to push it outwards. It felt like trying to hold back a raging river with my bare hands. Deeper, child, Maeve urged. Your ancestors did not ask. They commanded peace when it was needed. And then, one of the sparring pairs truly lost control, their fight turning vicious, blood drawn. A wave of raw, uncontrolled fury washed towards me from them, and instinctively, without thinking, I threw up a hand, a silent plea, a desperate no, erupting from my very core. A ripple visible only as a faint shimmer in the frigid air pulsed outwards from me. The fighting wolves stumbled, yelped, their snarls dying in their throats. They blinked, looking around in sudden, dazed confusion, the bloodlust draining from their eyes. A profound, unnatural quiet fell over the training ground. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. I stared at my hand, trembling. What had I just done? Maeve's grip on my arm was suddenly tight, her eyes gleaming with an emotion I couldn't name. Triumph? Hunger? Remarkable, child, she breathed, her voice no longer soothing but alive with a disturbing intensity. Truly remarkable. Your blood sings even more powerfully than the texts predicted. Before I could respond, before I could even process the shock of what had happened, a shadow fell over us. Alpha King Kai stood at the edge of the training ground, his massive form radiating an almost palpable energy. He hadn't been there moments before. How long had he been watching? His icy blue eyes were fixed on me, and this time, there was no mistaking the look in their depths. It was a potent cocktail of raw shock, unadulterated hunger, and something else. Something that looked terrifyingly like possessive, absolute claim. My breath caught in my throat. I had just revealed a power I didn't understand. A power Maeve clearly coveted. A power that had now drawn the full, unblinking attention of the Alpha King himself. The game had changed, and I had a horrifying feeling that I, Lyra, the last of my line, was no longer just a pawn, but the prize itself. And the battle for it was only just beginning. The Alpha King's eyes, those twin shards of Arctic ice, had burned into me on that training ground, not with anger, but with a raw, possessive hunger that had nothing to do with the calming aura I'd accidentally unleashed, and everything to do with the source of that power. My blood, my cursed, coveted lineage. In that moment, I wasn't Lyra, the lost Omega. I was a prize, a weapon, a mystery he intended to unlock, and the weight of that silent, consuming claim felt heavier than any mountain. What was I supposed to do now, knowing that the very essence of who I was, something I didn't even understand, was a beacon in the dark, drawing monsters and kings alike? Oh, how I longed for something simple, something known, a familiar hand to hold in this terrifying new landscape of my life. Little did I know, the cruelest deceptions often arrive wearing the masks of our deepest wishes. The days that followed were thick with an unspoken tension. Kai watched me, his presence a constant hum beneath my skin, a silent interrogation. He said nothing about the incident at the training grounds, yet his eyes followed my every move when our paths crossed, as if he could see the strange energy now thrumming just below the surface of my control. Maeve, on the other hand, was all gentle smiles and encouraging words, her lessons on my heritage becoming more frequent, more insistent. She spoke of ancient Lunas whose mere presence could sway battles, whose blood held the key to unimaginable pack prosperity. It sounded like a fairy tale, a beautiful, dangerous fairy tale she was trying to weave around me, and I didn't know whether to be terrified or enthralled. My heart, though, my foolish, stubborn heart, still ached for Davin, for the life I'd lost, the love I believed stolen. Every night, I clutched my mother's moonstone, praying to a silent moon for his safety, for some sign that he was alive. Hope, I was learning, was a particularly tenacious form of torture. Then, one blustery afternoon, a commotion erupted from the main courtyard, a cacophony of surprised shouts and urgent commands that even reached my secluded garden. My own heart leaped into my throat with a sudden, inexplicable premonition. I found myself running, heedless of the biting wind, towards the sound. Warriors were gathered at the great gates, their faces a mixture of shock and suspicion. And then I saw him, half carried, half dragged between two of Kai's guards. Ragged, bloodied, his clothes torn to shreds, his body slumped as if every bone were broken but alive. Impossibly, terrifyingly alive. Davin. A choked sob ripped from my throat. Davin. His head lolled weakly towards the sound of my voice. One eye was swollen shut, his handsome face marred by dirt and dried blood, but through the grime his other eye found mine, and a flicker of something passed through its dazed depths. Relief? Pain? Lyra, he rasped, his voice barely a breath, before his legs buckled completely. I surged forward, pushing through the stunned warriors, falling to my knees beside him as they lowered him gently to the frozen earth. Davin. Oh gods, Davin. What happened to you? Who did this? My hands hovered over him, terrified to touch, terrified not to. The scent of old blood and unimaginable suffering clung to him like a shroud. Silencers, he gasped, his body racked with a painful cough. They had me. Lyra. It was for you. Always for you. His eyes fluttered closed, and for one horrifying moment I thought he was gone again, this time forever. They carried him into the fortress, to a chamber near the healer's wing. Maeve herself oversaw his initial care, her expression one of profound sorrow and righteous anger. The brutes, she'd murmured, gently dabbing at a cut on his forehead with a dampened cloth. To do this to such a fine young alpha, to one of Lyra's own fated blood. Her gaze met mine, full of shared grief, and I clung to that perceived empathy like a drowning woman to driftwood. I refused to leave his side. For hours, I sat by the firs where he lay, watching his shallow breathing, my heart aching with a guilt so profound it threatened to consume me. He had suffered this because of me, because of my bloodline. When he finally stirred, his one good eye focusing on me, his voice was a mere whisper. Lyra, you're here. I thought I'd never see you again. Tears streamed down my face. Oh, Davin, I thought I'd never see you. What happened? How did you escape? He coughed, a raw, painful sound. It was a nightmare, Lyra. They took me the night I vanished. Cloaked figures. The silencers, Maeve called them. They knew about you, about your lineage. They wanted to know how to use you. His voice broke. I told them nothing, Lyra, I swear it. I endured. I endured so much, but I wouldn't betray you. His words, his pain, the sheer horror of what he was describing. It was like a physical blow. My fated mate, tortured for information about me. My fault. All my fault. They kept asking about your power, he continued, his breath catching. If it had awakened. How strong it was. I managed to break free during a transfer. Ran for days. Didn't know where I was going. Just hoped I could find my way back to warn you. He reached out a trembling hand, and I took it, his fingers surprisingly cold in mine. They are real, Lyra, and they want you. Maeve was right to fear them. Oh, Davin, I sobbed, pressing his hand to my cheek. I am so, so sorry. This is all because of me. No, my love, he whispered, his thumb weakly stroking my skin. It is because you are precious, unique, and I would die 1,000 times to keep you safe. His devotion, his suffering. It was a balm to my wounded soul, a confirmation of the love I had thought lost forever. Maeve, who had entered quietly, nodded approvingly from the doorway. Rest now, brave Alpha, she said softly to Davin. You are safe here. We will protect Lyra, and we will nurse you back to strength. She then turned to me. Stay with him, child. Your presence will be the best medicine. And I did. I stayed, my heart overflowing with a fierce, protective love for this male who had endured so much for my sake. Any lingering doubts, any confusing feelings I might have had about Alpha King Kai and his strange, possessive claim were momentarily eclipsed by the resurgence of this pure, familiar devotion. Davin was back. My fated mate was alive. And all that mattered was keeping him safe. My relief, however, was not shared by the master of this fortress. Alpha King Kai's reaction to Davin's return was chilling. He arrived at Davin's chamber later that day, a storm of cold fury and suspicion contained within his massive frame. I stood protectively beside Davin's furs, my small form no match for his, but my resolve firm. Alpha King Kai, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. Davin needs rest. He has suffered greatly. Kai's icy blue eyes flicked to me for a brief, dismissive instant, then settled on Davin with an intensity that made the air crackle. Suffered, has he? Kai's voice was a low growl, each word laced with a dangerous skepticism. Or merely inconvenienced? Davin, propped up against pillows, managed a weak glare. "Do these wounds look like an inconvenience, Your Majesty?" he rasped, gesturing to his bandaged arm. "Wounds can be acquired in many ways, pup," Kai said, taking a slow, deliberate step into the room. His scent, that wild mix of pine and blizzard, filled the chamber, overpowering the scent of herbs and Davin's own fainter alpha musk. "Tell me of your miraculous escape. The silencers are not known for their carelessness." Davin recounted his tale, his voice gaining a little strength as he spoke of his bravery, his cunning, his unwavering determination to return to me. It was a compelling story, filled with harrowing details that made my stomach clench with renewed horror. I watched Kai's face, searching for some sign of sympathy, of belief, but his expression remained granite, his eyes narrowed, unreadable. When Davin finished, breathless and seemingly exhausted by the effort, Kai was silent for a long moment. Then, he said, "A remarkable tale of endurance. Almost too remarkable." "Are you calling me a liar?" Davin bristled, trying to push himself up, wincing in pain. "I am calling you fortunate," Kai replied, his voice dangerously soft. "Fortunate to be alive. Fortunate to have found your way here." He turned his gaze back to me, and it was like being pinned by a glacier. For his own protection and for the security of this pack, Davin of the Silver Crescent will remain confined to these chambers. Guards will be posted. No one is to enter or leave without my express permission. "Confined?" I gasped, stepping forward. "But he's injured. He needs care, freedom to heal. You can't treat him like a prisoner." "Can I not?" Kai's eyebrow arched, a silent, chilling challenge. "He is a wolf from an outside pack, with an uncorroborated story of escaping an enemy that has plagued these lands for generations. Until I am satisfied of his truthfulness, and of the safety of my pack, he will be exactly where I deem him to be." He looked at Davin once more. "Rest well, Alpha Davin. You will have much time for it." With that, he turned and swept from the room, leaving behind an unnerving silence and my own seething indignation. How could he be so cruel, so suspicious? Davin was my fated mate. He had suffered for me. And Kai? Kai was treating him like a common criminal. "Don't listen to him, Lyra," Davin whispered, reaching for my hand again. His grip was stronger this time. He's just threatened by us, by our bond. He wants to keep you for himself, can't you see? He knows your bloodline is powerful, and he means to control it. Control you." His words, a venomous echo of my own deepest fears about Kai, found fertile ground in my anger and confusion. Kai, the possessive king who had claimed me like a spoil of war. Davin, the suffering hero who had endured torture for my sake. Who was I to believe? "He wouldn't," I began, but the doubt was already there, a poisonous seed taking root. "Wouldn't he, Lyra?" Davin pressed, his one good eye filled with a pained sincerity that tore at my heart. "Think about it. Why else would he keep you here, a virtual prisoner yourself, if not to use you? He doesn't care about you, not like I do. I'm the only one who truly understands what you are, what we could be together, once this nightmare with the silencers and his tyranny is over." I found myself nodding, my mind a whirl of conflicting emotions. Davin's words, his touch. It all felt so right, so familiar. A lifeline back to the love I had thought extinguished. Kai's actions, his coldness, his possessiveness felt like chains. What can we do?" I whispered, leaning closer to Davin. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched Davin's lips, quickly masked by a wince of pain. "For now, we must be patient. You must be strong, Lyra. But perhaps you could find out what Kai truly knows about the silencers, about your bloodline. Information could be our only weapon against him, our only way to ensure our freedom, our future together." His request seemed reasonable, logical even. If Kai was truly a threat, then understanding his motives, his knowledge, was crucial. And Davin trusted me to do this. For us. I will try, Davin, I promised, my voice low but firm. I will find out what he knows. He squeezed my hand. My brave Lyra, he murmured, his eye drifting closed as if in exhaustion. My only hope. As I slipped from his chamber later, under the watchful eyes of Kai's guards, a new resolve settled within me. Davin was right. Kai was the enemy here, the obstacle to my happiness, to our safety. And I would do whatever it took to protect my fated mate and uncover the truth no matter the cost. I had no idea, of course, that the truth I was about to uncover would be far more monstrous than Kai's suspected tyranny, and that the fated mate I was so determined to save was, in fact, the architect of my deepest despair, patiently luring me deeper into his web. The game, Maeve had said, was just beginning. I was beginning to understand I wasn't just a player. I was the board itself. My promise to Davin to uncover Alpha King Kai's secrets was a small, defiant flame against the overwhelming darkness of my fear. Davin was my fated, my love, the one who had suffered so terribly because of me, because of this mysterious power in my blood. And Kai? Kai was the cage, the cold authority, the one who held Davin prisoner and me in this gilded prison of a fortress. Or so I told myself, again and again, trying to drown out the tiny, treacherous whisper in the back of my mind that asked, "But what if you're wrong, Lyra? What if the bars of this cage are not where you think they are?" It was a thought I couldn't afford to entertain, not when Davin's haunted eyes pleaded for my help. So, I began to watch, to listen, though I was a clumsy spy at best. My attempts to glean information about Kai's plans from the stoic guards or the tight-lipped servants were met with polite deflections or blank stares. He was their Alpha King. Their loyalty was a wall I couldn't seem to penetrate. Davin, bless his recovering heart, was full of suggestions. "Perhaps the map room, Lyra?" He'd whispered during one of my visits to his guarded chamber, his hand gripping mine with a feverish intensity. "Or the Elder's archives? Kai respects Maeve. He might share his plans with her." His eyes, when they looked at me, were full of a desperate hope that both spurred me on and twisted something uncomfortably in my gut. There was a new intensity to him, a hunger that sometimes felt less like love and more like need. But I pushed that thought away. He was weak, recovering. Of course, he needed me. "Just be careful, my love," he'd added, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. "Kai is more dangerous than he appears. He covets what you are, what we could be, if only we were free of his shadow." My visits with Maeve for my lessons also took on a new layer of scrutiny from my end. Her gentle smiles, her soothing words about my ancestral gifts, they still seemed genuine, yet sometimes when she spoke of the power my bloodline held, her eyes would gleam with an almost avaricious light that made my skin crawl. "Your lineage, Lyra," she'd said one afternoon, her hand resting lightly on my arm, "is destined for greatness. But greatness often requires guidance. The right guidance." And her fingers had tightened just for a fraction of a second before relaxing again into that maternal pat. "You understand, don't you, child, why it is so important you master these echoes within you?" "To protect myself from the silencers?" I'd offered, the answer she always seemed to approve of. "Among other things," she'd murmured, her gaze distant, thoughtful. "Among many other things." It was all so confusing. Davin painted Kai as a tyrant. Maeve spoke of protecting me while pushing me to explore powers I didn't understand. And Kai? Kai simply watched, his icy blue eyes missing nothing, his silence a heavier weight than any spoken threat. Her thoughts spun, like dead leaves in a winter wind, and I felt caught in a web of secrets, none of them my own. Then one day an opportunity, or perhaps a trap my cynical new self whispered, presented itself. I was in the small antechamber adjoining Kai's private study, a place I was usually forbidden, ostensibly to return a book Maeve had lent me on ancient northern bloodlines. The room was empty, but on a side table, usually kept clear, lay an old leather-bound ledger and a rolled-up map, secured with a simple leather tie. My heart hammered against my ribs. This had to be it. Something Kai had left. Something important. Was this his carelessness? Or, a more chilling thought, a deliberate test? She didn't know what scared her more. The Alpha King's cunning or her own desperate need to find something, anything, to help Davin. My hands trembled as I reached for the ledger. Its pages were brittle, filled with spidery script detailing pack lineages, alliances, and trade routes for rare herbs, some of which I recognized as ingredients Maeve used in the infusions she gave me for strengthening my inner core. Odd. Why would Kai be interested in Maeve's herbal remedies? I unrolled the map. It depicted the northern territories, but marked on it were several locations deep within the treacherous Shadowfen, the very place Maeve had claimed she saw Davin with the cloaked figures. And beside those markings were notes, in Kai's bold, angular script, about silencer activity and ancient ritual sites. My breath caught. Davin had said the silencers had taken him from the festival, before he reached the Shadowfen, but Kai's map suggested concentrated silencer activity within the fen itself, tied to rituals. A small, cold knot of unease began to form in my stomach. The details weren't quite aligning. Just then, I heard footsteps in the corridor outside, purposeful and heavy. Kai. Panic, sharp and icy, flooded through me. Before she could move, I shoved the ledger and map back onto the table, praying they looked undisturbed, and darted behind a heavy tapestry depicting some ancient alpha battle, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. The door opened. I held my breath, pressing myself flat against the cold stone wall, the rough wool of the tapestry scratching my cheek. I could smell his scent, pine and snow and that unique, powerful musk that was all Kai as he entered the room. I heard the rustle of parchments, the soft thud of the ledger being picked up, then set down. The silence stretched, and every beat of my heart felt like a betraying shout. "You can come out, Lyra," his voice, that deep, gravelly rumble, finally said, devoid of inflection but laced with an amusement that was somehow more terrifying than anger. My blood turned to ice. He knew. He'd known all along. Slowly, my legs like lead, I stepped out from behind the tapestry. I couldn't meet his eyes. "Looking for something?" he asked, his tone deceptively mild. I was returning Elder Maeve's book," I stammered, gesturing vaguely towards the table where I hadn't even placed it. "Indeed," he said, and I could feel his gaze on me, dissecting, knowing. "You seem to have developed a keen interest in maps and ledgers of late, little moonflower. A new hobby?" My face burned. I was just curious." "Curiosity," Kai mused, taking a step closer, and I had to fight the instinct to shrink away. "It can be a dangerous trait, Lyra, especially when one is curious about things that do not concern them." His eyes, when I finally dared to meet them, were like chips of frozen sapphire, hard and unyielding. "Or perhaps," he continued, his voice dropping to that low, possessive purr that always made my skin prickle, "your curiosity was guided? Was he accusing Maeve? Or Davin? Or me?" I didn't know. I just wanted to escape. To run. I should go," I whispered, turning to flee. "Not yet," he said, and his hand shot out, not a harsh grip, but firm enough to stop me, his fingers closing around my arm. The contact was like a jolt of lightning, hot and cold all at once. "We have much to discuss, you and I, about your value, and about the company you keep." His words hung in the air, a clear, unmistakable threat, and the tiny knot of unease in my stomach tightened into a vice of pure dread. He knew I was visiting Davin. He knew I was searching, and he was warning me, but about whom? In the quiet that followed, I realized the web was far more tangled than I had ever imagined, and I was caught right in its center, with predators closing in from all sides. The encounter with Kai left me shaken, but also strangely galvanized. His warning, his suspicion, it didn't align with the tyrant Davin described. If Kai suspected Davin, why allow him to recover here at all, even under guard? And his comment about my curiosity being guided, it made me look at Maeve with new, sharper eyes. Her gentle concern, her constant presence, her endless questions about my lineage and what I felt. Was it guidance, or was it grooming? Davin, when I recounted Kai's veiled threats, though I omitted my discovery of the map and ledger, a small act of self-preservation I couldn't quite explain, was all righteous fury. "You see, Lyra," he'd exclaimed, his voice tight with feigned outrage. "He seeks to isolate you, to control you. He fears our bond, fears what we represent together." "But the map, Davin," I'd almost blurted out, then stopped myself. No, I needed more. I needed to be sure. My chance came a few nights later. A fierce blizzard had descended upon the fortress, its roar a wild symphony outside my window, the very stones of the keep seeming to tremble with its fury. Most of the pack were hunkered down, the corridors unusually quiet. Davin was supposedly asleep, a sleeping draft provided by Maeve ensuring his restful recovery. Maeve herself had retired early, or so she'd said. A desperate, reckless idea took root. Maeve's chambers. If she was involved in something, if she was truly manipulating me, there might be something there, some proof. It was a wild gamble, but the doubts, the inconsistencies, they were gnawing at me. Her body moved on instinct, a creature of shadow and desperation. I slipped from my room, my heart a frantic bird against my ribs. The corridors were dim, patrolled only by the howling wind. I reached Maeve's chambers, the door unlocked. My breath hitched. It felt too easy. Inside, her room was Spartan, but for a large, carved chest tucked away in an alcove. My fingers fumbled with the latch. It was heavy, ancient. With a surge of adrenaline, I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled amongst dried herbs and strange carved totems, was a slim, oilskin-wrapped packet. My hands shook so badly I could barely untie the thong. There were letters, several of them, penned in a familiar, elegant script, Maeve's, and another, bolder, more impetuous hand that made my blood run cold. Davin's. I sank to the floor, the letters spilling around me, the wind outside a mournful echo of the shattering of my world. "The girl's bloodline is key. Her grief upon your loss must be profound enough to awaken it fully." That was Maeve. "She trusts me implicitly, Elder. She will do whatever I ask. Kai suspects nothing of our true alliance." That was Davin. My Davin. Letter after letter, a meticulous, cold-blooded account of their entire deception. His faked disappearance, their plan to manipulate me, to use my grief, my love for him, to awaken the power in my bloodline. Their ultimate goal, to harness that power with me as their unwitting conduit or their willing puppet, to challenge and overthrow Alpha King Kai, with Maeve as the new power behind the throne, and Davin, presumably, as her favored consort. The words blurred before my eyes, each one a shard of ice piercing my heart, my soul, my fated mate. The world didn't just tilt when Maeve's cold words confirmed the nightmare scattered in ink and parchment around me. It fractured, splintered into a million glittering shards of betrayal, each one reflecting the monstrous truth. Davin, my fated love, my cherished dream, was a lie. Maeve, my gentle guide, a serpent. And I, Lyra, the last of some forgotten, powerful bloodline, was nothing but a pawn in their venomous game. But as Maeve's shadow fell over me, her voice dripping with that false, poisoned honey, something deep inside me, something I didn't even know existed, refused to shatter completely. "Now the real lessons can begin," she'd said, and in that instant, though terror clawed at my throat, a tiny, defiant ember sparked to life in the ruins of my heart. Oh yes, Elder, I thought. The real lessons are about to begin. But you might be surprised who's teaching whom. Surprised, child? Maeve's voice was a silken taunt. Her eyes, those pale gray pools I'd once mistaken for calm wisdom, now gleamed with a chilling, triumphant light. She gestured to the damning letters strewn across the furs at my feet. Or did some small, insightful part of you always suspect the pretty words of your fated boy were a little too sweet, his suffering a little too artfully portrayed? I scrambled back, pressing myself against the cold stone of her chamber wall, the letters clutched in my fist like a shield. My voice, when I found it, was a ragged whisper. Why? Why would you do this? Davin? He was my fated mate. Maeve actually chuckled then, a dry, rustling sound like dead leaves skittering across a grave. Fated, schmated girl. Fate is a story we tell children. Power, true power, that's the only destiny worth seizing. Your bloodline holds such power, Lyra. Enough to reshape this pack, this world, under the right guidance. Her gaze flicked over me, possessive and unnervingly hungry. Davin understood that. He understood that loyalty to a grander vision far outweighs some sentimental, moon-spun notion of fated love. He chose wisely. He chose to betray me, I cried, the words tearing from my raw throat. He chose to lie, to use me. He chose to be a king, little Omega, Maeve corrected, her voice turning sharp as a shard of ice. And you, my dear, were simply the key to his kingdom, and to mine. She took a step closer, and I could smell the strange, dry scent of the herbs she always carried, now mixed with something metallic, like old blood. But don't fret. Your part isn't over. In fact, it's only just beginning. You will learn to control that power, Lyra. You will learn to wield it. For me. A cold fury, so potent it momentarily eclipsed my terror, surged through me. I will never help you, I spat, my own voice surprising me with its venom. Maeve's eyes narrowed. Oh, you will, child. You have no choice. Davin will ensure it. Or perhaps, her lips curved into that terrible smile again, your Alpha King Kai will. Once he understands the true extent of what you can do you think he'll let such a weapon go unused? He claimed you, didn't he? For your value. She paused. Now, be a good girl. Gather those letters. They are, after all, merely the syllabus for your new education. She seemed so sure of herself, so confident in her web of deceit. And in that moment, a desperate, wild plan began to form in my mind. She thought I was broken. She thought I was hers to command. She was wrong. I don't know how I managed to leave Maeve's chamber with any semblance of composure. My hands shook so violently I could barely hold the damning letters. My legs felt like water, but I forced myself to walk, not run, through the dim, torch-lit corridors of Kai's fortress. Every shadow seemed to leap out at me. Every distant sound felt like one of Maeve's silencers closing in. My one thought, my only thought, was Kai. He had been suspicious of Davin. He had warned me about my curiosity being guided. He was my enemy, my captor, yes, but he was also straightforward in his power, in his claims. Unlike the smiling deceit of Maeve and the heartbreaking treachery of Davin. Could he be an ally? The thought was absurd, terrifying, yet it was the only lifeline I could grasp. I found him in his vast, fire-lit study, the same room where he had confronted me before. He was hunched over a massive table, covered in maps and scrolls, the weight of his rule etched into the lines around his mouth. He looked up as I burst in, his icy blue eyes widening almost imperceptibly at my disheveled state, my tear-streaked face, the desperate terror that must have been rolling off me in waves. Lyra? His voice was a low rumble, laced with something. Not anger. Surprise? Words wouldn't come. I just stumbled forward, my legs finally giving out, and sank to my knees before him, thrusting the crumpled letters into his hand. Read them, I choked out, the words thick with unshed tears. Please, You have to read them." He took the letters, his gaze never leaving my face for a long moment, as if trying to decipher the ruin he saw there. Then, slowly, he began to read. I watched him, my breath held captive in my chest as his expression shifted. The initial surprise hardened into a grim understanding, then into a cold, simmering fury that made the very air in the room crackle. His jaw clenched, a muscle twitching violently. When he finally looked up from the last letter, his eyes were like chips of a winter storm, blazing with a rage that was not directed at me, but for me. "The viper," he bit out, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "And the pup she used as her fang. They planned it all," I whispered, fresh tears spilling over. Davin's disappearance, my grief, my bloodline. It was all a lie, a trick to use me, to get to you. Kai rose then, a towering figure of controlled power, and came around the table. I flinched as he knelt before me, but his touch, when his large hands gently cupped my face, was surprisingly tender. His calloused thumbs wiped away my tears. "He told you I was the tyrant, didn't he?" Kai murmured, his voice rough with an emotion I couldn't name. "That I sought to control you, to use your power for myself?" I nodded mutely, ashamed of how easily I had believed it, how ready I had been to see him as the villain. "And now you know the truth, little moonflower," he said, his gaze holding mine, intense and unwavering. "The real monsters are not always the ones who show their teeth." He paused, and in that moment, the vast chasm between us, Alpha King and claimed Omega, captor and captive, seemed to shrink, replaced by something new, something fragile but fiercely real. "They will not have you, Lyra. I swear this on my blood, on my pack. They will not use what is mine." His words, "What is mine," still held that edge of possession, but now they sounded less like a threat and more like a vow, a shield. My heart, so recently shattered, gave a small, tentative flutter. Could it be? Could this terrifying Alpha King, the one I had feared and resented, truly be my only ally, my only protection? Between one breath and the next, something shifted within me, a reluctant seedling of trust beginning to unfurl in the desolate landscape of my soul. "We must act quickly," Kai said, his voice regaining its sharp edge of command as he helped me to my feet, though his grip on my arm remained, a steadying, surprisingly comforting presence. "Maeve is cunning. Now that she knows you've seen these, she will not wait." What will we do?" I asked, my voice still shaky, but a spark of resolve igniting within me, fueled by his unexpected support. "First," he said, his eyes scanning my face, "you are not to return to your chambers alone. You will stay here in my private wing where I can ensure your safety." My breath caught. His private wing? "And then," he continued, seemingly oblivious to my reaction, "we will bring in those I trust. Very few now. It seems the serpent's poison has spread further than I thought." His jaw tightened again. "This pack will be cleansed." True to his word, within the hour, 3 of Kai's most formidable warriors, alphas whose loyalty to him was legend, were assembled in his study. Their faces were grim as Kai laid out the contents of the letters, his voice a low, controlled thunder. I watched them, expecting to see suspicion, perhaps even contempt directed at me, the Omega whose arrival had clearly brought such turmoil. Instead, their eyes held a grim respect and a fierce, protective anger on behalf of their king and, surprisingly, on my behalf. "Elder Maeve has been a trusted voice in this pack for generations," one of them, a grizzled warrior named Boren, said, his voice heavy with disbelief. "And Davin of Silver Crescent. To use a fated bond in such a way? It is an abomination." "It is treason," Kai corrected, his voice like ice, "and it will be met as such." They began to strategize then, their voices low and urgent, plans forming and reforming like battle lines on a map. And I, Lyra, was not dismissed. Kai kept me by his side, asking for my insights into Maeve's manipulations, Davin's lies, the subtle ways they had tried to influence me. My words, hesitant at first, then gaining strength, were listened to, valued. For the first time since arriving in this frozen kingdom, I felt seen. Not as a prize, not as a curse, but as an ally, a survivor. Amidst the grim talk of traps and counterattacks, of exposing the traitors and rallying the loyal, there was a moment, just a fleeting one. Kai had been outlining a particularly dangerous part of the plan, one that would involve me directly, using my bloodline's unique aura as a lure. Fear, cold and sharp, had pricked at me, and I must have shown it because he paused, his icy blue eyes softening almost imperceptibly as they met mine. His hand, large and warm, covered mine where it rested on the table, his touch sending a jolt of unexpected heat through me. "You will not be alone in this, Lyra," he murmured, his voice for my ears only, a low, protective rumble that vibrated deep within my chest. "I will be with you, every step." And in his eyes, I saw not the cold alpha king, but a fierce, protective warrior, a male. And for the first time, looking at him, my heart didn't just pound with fear. It pounded with something else, something wild and reckless and dangerously, exhilaratingly new. The air thickened, the space between us burned, and I knew with a certainty that both terrified and thrilled me that the greatest battle was yet to come. But this time, I would not face it alone. The old seer's words came back to me then. A king of winter will forge a new destiny in fire and ice. The fire was the fury of betrayal. The ice was Kai's unyielding strength and our new destiny. It was being forged right now in the heart of the storm. But as the plan solidified, a horrifying thought struck me. What if Maeve and Davin suspected we knew? What if they moved first? The taste of fear was coppery in my mouth. The silence in Alpha King Kai's war room was a living thing, coiling tighter with every beat of my frantic heart, a stretched moment before the inevitable snap. We'd laid our plans, desperate strategies against an enemy hidden within our own walls, but the fear, cold and sharp, that Maeve and Davin would strike first, that they already knew we suspected, was a bitter taste in my mouth. And just as I whispered that dread aloud, what if they already know Kai? What if they act before we can? The ancient warning horn of the northern pack fortress shattered the night, its mournful, urgent howl a scream of betrayal echoing through the stone and ice. The storm hadn't just arrived, it had been brewing inside our sanctuary all along. "They're moving," Kai snarled, his transformation already a ripple beneath his skin, his icy eyes blazing with a terrifying, controlled fury. He was beside me in an instant, his hand gripping my arm, not with the bruising force of a captor this time, but with the steely reassurance of a protector, an ally. "Borin! To the west gate! Secure it! Rella, the armory! Lyra, you stay with me!" His commands cut through the sudden chaos of shouts and running feet outside the study, a beacon of order in the erupting madness. My own fear was a wild bird trapped in my chest, but strangely, alongside it, a cold, clear resolve began to crystallize. I would not be the terrified Omega cowering in her room this time. I would not be a pawn. "No, Kai," I said, my voice surprisingly steady as I met his fierce gaze. "I won't hide. Maeve wants me. Davin wants my bloodline. I can't just wait for them to find me. I need to fight." For a heartbeat, I saw surprise flicker in his eyes, quickly replaced by something else. A harsh, reluctant pride. "You fight by staying alive, little moonflower," he growled, his thumb brushing my cheek in a gesture so unexpectedly tender it stole my breath. "Your power is new, untested in true battle. Stay with my personal guard. They will die before they let anyone reach you. That is my command." Before I could argue further, the doors to the study burst open, and not by Kai's loyalists. It was 3 warriors I vaguely recognized, their faces usually impassive in their duties around the keep. now twisted into snarls of unfamiliar aggression, their eyes glowing with the feral light of those fully committed to Maeve's dark promises. Traitors. Already so close. So much for staying safe, I breathed, my hand instinctively going to the small moonstone I now wore on a thong around my neck. Kai didn't waste words. He was a blur of motion, a primal force of alpha power unleashed, and 2 of the traitors were down, broken and still, before I could even fully register the attack. The 3rd lunged not at Kai but at me, a chillingly clear indication of my value in this fight. "Lyra!" Kai roared, spinning to intercept, but the traitor was fast, his claws extended. I didn't think. Her body moved on instinct, as they say. But it wasn't just instinct. It was that strange, thrumming power within me, answering a desperate call. I threw up my hands, not in defense, but in a strange, intuitive gesture of command? A wave of energy, cool and silvery like moonlight, pulsed from me, not with force, but with an overwhelming sense of authority. The attacking wolf stumbled mid-lunge, his snarl dying in his throat, his eyes suddenly wide with confusion, then a dawning instinctual fear. He skidded to a halt, whining, then actually lowered his head, his ears flattening in submission. To me. I stared, my hand still outstretched, my own heart hammering. What had I just done? Kai was at my side in an instant, dispatching the momentarily subdued traitor with ruthless efficiency, before turning to me, his eyes blazing with an almost frightening intensity. "The west gate is breached," Boren's voice bellowed from the corridor. "They're pouring in!" "Stay behind me," Kai ordered, his voice a low growl meant for me alone, but his eyes held that same awe I'd seen when my moonstone first glowed. He knew. He understood what was happening to me, perhaps better than I did. And in that moment, facing the chaos together, something profound shifted between us, an unspoken acknowledgement of a power shared, a destiny intertwined, even if it was being forged in the heart of a bloody uprising. "No matter what," he said, his gaze locking with mine, "we face this together." And as fire bloomed beneath my skin, a strange confidence took root. I was Lyra of the Silent Moon, and my song was finally beginning. The fortress had become a raging inferno of battle. The air was thick with the coppery scent of blood, the snarls of fighting wolves, the clash of steel as Kai's loyalists met the traitors, and Maeve's shadowy silencers in brutal, close-quarters combat. Kai was everywhere, a whirlwind of righteous fury, his alpha strength a devastating force, his presence a rallying cry for those still loyal. I stayed close to him, as commanded, flanked by his 2 most trusted guards, Rella and a grim-scarred male named Jorund. But I was not idle. Twice, when silencers broke through their lines, aiming for Kai's exposed back, that strange power surged through me. Once, a wave of disorienting fear emanated from me, sending the attackers stumbling back in confusion, giving Kai the opening he needed. Another time, as Rella struggled with 2 traitors, a focused burst of silvery light from my outstretched hand seemed to momentarily blind them, allowing her to gain the upper hand. I didn't understand how I was doing it. I only knew that when the need was dire, when Kai was threatened, something inside me answered. He would glance back at me after each instance, his eyes filled with a fierce, almost reverent light, a silent acknowledgement that did more to bolster my courage than any spoken praise. We moved as a unit, the 4 of us, a small island of deadly purpose in the swirling chaos. I saw Maeve once across the ravaged Great Hall. She stood on a raised dais, a dark sorceress directing her troops, her face alight with a chilling, ecstatic power. Her eyes met mine, and she smiled, a slow, knowing smile that promised pain and dominion. The fight was far from over. And then, I saw him. Davin. He wasn't cowering, wasn't playing the victim. He fought with a savage grace, his movements fluid and deadly, cutting down one of Kai's younger warriors without a flicker of remorse. The sight of him, so confident, so whole, so utterly different from the broken male who had wept in my arms, was like a physical blow, reigniting all the fury of his betrayal. He was no pawn. He was a willing, eager participant in this slaughter. "Davin!" My voice ripped from my throat, raw with anguish and rage. He turned, his eyes, those eyes I had once loved with all my naive heart, now glinted with a cold, predatory light as they fixed on me. A cruel smirk twisted his lips. "Lyra, my sweet, deluded moonflower, come to join the winning side." "You won't win, Davin," I spat, stepping forward, ignoring Rella's warning hiss. "Your lies are done." "Are they?" He advanced, circling me slowly, a predator sizing up his prey. "Maeve understands power, Lyra. She understands your worth. Kai? He just wants to keep you leashed, a pretty pet. I offer you a throne beside me, once Maeve has what she wants from him." "What Maeve wants is to destroy everything," I cried. "And you're helping her. You, who swore you loved me, who was fated to me." His laughter was a harsh, ugly sound. "Fate? Oh, Lyra? You still believe in such bedtime stories? Fate is what the powerful decide it is, and Maeve is very powerful. As am I, now." He lunged then, fast as a striking viper. I met him, not with tears this time, but with the cold, hard fury of my awakened bloodline. That calming aura I'd projected before, now it was a shield, shimmering around me, deflecting his first clumsy blow. He stumbled back, surprise warring with anger on his face. "What is this?" he snarled. "What has that brute Kai taught you?" "This isn't Kai's teaching, Davin," I said, my voice low and steady, the power thrumming through me, clear and strong. "This is me. The Lyra you never truly saw, the Lyra you tried to break." We circled each other, the sounds of the larger battle fading around us. This a deeply personal vortex of betrayal and reckoning. He attacked again, all brute force and aggression. But I was different now. I could almost anticipate his moves, sense the shift in his energy. My movements were fluid, guided by an instinct I didn't recognize but trusted implicitly. I didn't need to match his strength. I used his own momentum against him, deflecting, evading, until he was panting, his confident smirk replaced by a frustrated rage. "You were supposed to be on mine to control," he roared, launching a desperate, wild attack. "I belong to no one but myself, Davin," I said, and as he lunged, I focused all my will, all the silvery energy thrumming within me into a single point. It wasn't a physical blow I struck, but something deeper. A wave of profound truth, of all his lies and betrayals, seemed to wash over him, emanating from me. He screamed, a raw, agonized sound, clutching his head and stumbled back, his eyes wide with a terror that had nothing to do with physical pain. It was the terror of a soul seeing its own ugliness reflected. He fell to his knees, gasping, the fight completely drained from him, leaving him a hollow, broken shell. I stood over him, trembling, not from fear, but from the sheer force of what had just passed through me. Justice, or something very much like it. But as I looked up, my temporary victory turned to ash in my mouth. Across the hall, Maeve had Kai cornered. A sickly green light crackling around her hands, Kai staggering, a dark stain spreading on his side. My heart stopped. Kai, the world narrowed to a single horrifying image. Kai, my fierce, indomitable alpha king, staggering under a blast of Maeve's sickly green energy. A dark stain blossoming like a poisoned rose on the silver wolf pelt armor across his side. His groan of pain was a physical blow to my own chest. Davin, a broken whisper of betrayal on the blood-slicked stones at my feet, ceased to exist. There was only Kai, falling, and Maeve, her face a mask of triumphant evil, raising her hands for another final strike. In that instant, something ancient and wild within me didn't just stir. It roared, a conflagration of protective fury that burned away every last vestige of fear, every doubt. If he was to be my destiny, forged in fire and ice as the seer had foretold, then I would become the inferno to protect my king. Kai! My scream ripped through the din of the dying battle as I launched myself towards him, heedless of the crackling, malevolent energy still coiling around Maeve. Touching, Maeve sneered, her eyes glittering with madness as she turned her attention to me, her hands still glowing with that vile green light. The little Omega comes to save her master. How quaint. His alpha essence, so potent, so nearly mine, will only be sweetened by your sacrifice, child of the silent moon. She thought I was still the frightened girl she'd manipulated. She was about to learn how wrong she was. He is not my master, Maeve, I declared, my voice ringing with a power that felt drawn from the very heart of the mountains, from the spirit of the moon itself. I reached Kai's side, dropping to my knees, my hands instinctively going to his wound, though I knew no healer's art. He is my alpha, my king, and you will not have him. A shimmering silver aura, the one that had deflected Davin, now flared around me, brighter, stronger than before, pushing back against the oppressive wave of Maeve's dark energy. She hissed, her eyes widening slightly. Such spirit, she mused, a flicker of something akin to respect in her venomous tone. A pity it will be extinguished so soon, or perhaps redirected. She raised her hands, the green energy coalescing into a jagged spear of light aimed directly at Kai's exposed heart. No, I cried, throwing myself over him, bracing for the impact. But then Kai moved. Weakened, bleeding, he still had the heart of a king. His arm, strong even in injury, wrapped around my waist, pulling me tight against his side as he somehow found the strength to roll us both, the spear of dark magic sizzling past, scorching the stone where we'd been moments before. Lyra, he gasped, his breath hot against my ear, his voice strained but still carrying that undeniable command. Her power, it feeds on fear, on despair. Don't give it to her. His words, even in this desperate moment, were a lifeline. Fear was a luxury I couldn't afford. I looked into his eyes, those brilliant blue depths now clouded with pain but still holding that fierce, unyielding light, and something clicked within me, a profound, resonant harmony. My bloodline wasn't just a weapon. It was a connection, an amplifier, and connected to him, to his indomitable will. Together, then, I whispered, my hand finding his, our fingers lacing, a silent vow passing between us. Always, he rasped, a ghost of his possessive smile touching his lips. We rose as one, a united front against the cackling fury that was Maeve. You cannot win, she shrieked, unleashing another barrage of emerald fire. His strength fades. Your pathetic light is no match for the shadows I command. My light is not mine alone, Maeve, I said, and I could feel it now. Kai's strength flowing into me, my own ancestral power surging to meet his, our energies intertwining, amplifying. The silver aura around us intensified, pulsing with the pure, cold light of the deep winter moon. It is the light of this pack, of this land, of every true heart you have sought to corrupt. The green fire met our silver shield, and for a moment the world was a maelstrom of warring energies, the very stones of the fortress groaning under the strain. Maeve poured more power into her attack, her face contorting with effort and rage. But our light held. And then it began to push back. No, she screamed, as her own dark magic, unable to penetrate our combined defense, began to recoil upon her. This cannot be. I am Maeve. I am power. You are betrayal, Maeve. Kai's voice boomed, stronger now as he leaned on me, our combined stance unshakable. And betrayal always consumes itself. With a final ear-splitting shriek, Maeve was engulfed in her own corrupted green flames, her form twisting, blackening, until with a deafening implosion she was simply gone. Leaving behind only the acrid smell of burnt magic and a profound, ringing silence. The battle was over. The silence that descended upon the great hall was heavy, broken only by the groans of the wounded and the soft weeping of those who had lost loved ones. Kai sagged against me, his strength finally giving out, and together we sank to the ground, both of us trembling, bleeding, but alive. Alive? "You did it, Lyra," he murmured, his head resting against my shoulder, his breath ragged. "Your light. It saved us." "Our light, Kai," I corrected softly, my fingers gently tracing the harsh line of his jaw. "We saved each other." And in that moment, amidst the ruin and the sorrow, surrounded by the loyal warriors who were already moving to secure the fortress and tend to their own, a profound sense of peace settled over me. The fight was done. The monsters were vanquished. The days and weeks that followed were a blur of healing, both for our bodies and for the pack's wounded spirit. Davin, I learned later, had been found where I left him, a broken, whimpering creature stripped of his false bravado. He faced the pack's justice, swift and final, but he was already a ghost to me, a phantom of a love that had never truly existed. The true traitors within Maeve's Silencer faction were rooted out, their dark influence cleansed from the Northern Pack. There was much grief, yes, for those lost, for the trust so cruelly broken, but there was also a new sense of unity, of strength forged in the crucible of that terrible night, and Kai, my Alpha King. Our bond, born in chaos and sealed in battle, deepened with every passing day. The harsh lines of the captor softened, revealing the noble heart of the protector, the quiet strength of the leader, and, to my unending surprise, the tender soul of a lover. Months later, as the first thaws of spring began to paint the formidable northern mountains with fleeting hints of green, Kai led me to the highest parapet of the fortress. The sun was setting, bathing the vast wild landscape in hues of rose and gold. The air was clean, crisp, full of the promise of renewal. "It's beautiful," I whispered, leaning against him, his arm warm and strong around my waist. "It is our home, Lyra," he said, his voice a low rumble against my hair. "And you are its heart. It's Luna." He turned me then, his icy blue eyes, no longer glacial, but warm and deep as a summer sky, gazing into mine with an emotion that made my own heart soar. The old seer spoke of a destiny forged in fire and ice. The fire was their betrayal, my little moonflower. The ice was my fear of never finding a true mate. His thumb gently stroked my cheek. "But you are the dawn that came after the storm. You are my chosen love, my fated heart. Not by some ancient decree, but by every shared breath, every battle fought, every victory won. By us." "Oh, Kai," I breathed, my own eyes filling with happy tears. My bloodline, once a source of fear and manipulation, now felt like a quiet song of strength within me, a song that harmonized perfectly with his own powerful melody. I was no longer just Lyra, the outcast, the prize. I was Lyra, Luna of the Northern Pack, beloved of its Alpha King. He lowered his head, and his lips met mine, a kiss that tasted of forever, of promises kept, of a deep, abiding love that had weathered the most terrible of storms and emerged stronger, brighter, than any fated bond could ever have hoped to be. The wind carried our whispered vows out over the silent, watchful mountains, and I knew, with a certainty that resonated to the very core of my being, that this was our truth, our legacy. A new dawn indeed, and our love, a legend just beginning.